21. Rage. 3 days after leaving Beryl, Knox, Kip, and Logan sat overlooking Rickon. The first day they had said their goodbyes in the early morning hours and made their way to the stolen transport stashed in the brush. Not long after, they had met a pod of Deckham on the main road. Trying to avoid further Earthbound and save time, they shifted their plan and diverted for the mountain pass, which was a gamble Knox wasn't sure had paid off. What had started as a packed road leading up toward Aegis Lake, once within the Resolute Mountains, quickly deteriorated to an overgrown path. Logan took over driving so Knox could jump out to clear debris when needed, and it was needed a lot. Kip perched between them on the flat storage compartment between the seats. Despite her silence, she seemed to be enjoying the trip. Now that she was free of the grime of their first encounter, her head was a tumble of dark curls. Like Amelia's. He'd learned to check in with the girl for breaks and food once he realized she wouldn't ask of her own accord. The thought brought with it a flush of shame. Poor child had nearly inhaled the fruit he'd shared with her the first day. Not feeling his own hunger pangs, he'd completely neglected to pause and eat until late in the day when Logan started complaining. They had found a comfortable rhythm despite the challenges, and now here they sat on a ridgeline overlooking Rickon. A bubble of excitement built in his chest. He could see the cleared fields and the houses and buildings that made up the cluster peeking through the trees. "Now there's a sight I never thought I would see again," Logan said, voice rough. Knox pressed his lips, biting back a flood of emotion. The cluster appeared to be untouched. The field where they fought the Brekka was still furrowed, but he couldn't see any other obvious damage. Home. His body hummed with anticipation. He was so close to Amelia he felt her absence as a physical ache. Logan laughed. "Go. I'll drive Kip down to your place." Kip's eyes tracked between the two men, clearly trying to understand what was going on. Knox flashed her a reassuring grin. "I'm going to run ahead." Her eyes widened, and she gripped the sleeve of his shirt. "It'll be like when I move trees from the road. I'm only going a little further ahead to make sure it's safe. I'll meet you at the bottom." Her brows furrowed and mouth pursed in a sour expression. Hey, he soothed. "Logan is going to drive you right behind me." "Sure will, Kipper," Logan said brightly. "Maybe we can even try to race old Knox and beat him there." She peeked across to Logan. He continued in an animated fashion, smiling wide. Who is this man? Certainly not the same one who'd begged for death and cursed Knox's name. "I'll even let you help me drive." Logan let the offer dangle, and Kip lifted her head and looked between the two men for a moment. Finally, she reached her arms out and let Logan pull her onto the driver's seat with him. "All right, Knox, get out of here. Kipper and I have some racing to do." "You sure?" Knox couldn't hold back the stupid grin that had plastered itself on his face. Logan rolled his eyes and dropped the vehicle back into gear. "Go, we'll see you in the cluster. Say hi to Amelia." Knox was gone before Logan could even finish his sentence. He launched himself out over the descending slope and cleared a handful of switchbacks before he touched down and started running. The steep terrain gave way to the gentle foothills of the cluster, and Knox left the road for the familiar paths through the tall trees. The air held the sweet smell of the first fallen leaves, and he let out a whoop of joy as he crashed through them. Skirting the cluster proper, Knox angled for home and Amelia. He ached to hold her, to squeeze her in his arms and kiss her. There were tears to share and words to be spoken. And he wanted to introduce her to the little slip of a girl who had been put in his care. Amelia would love the child. He knew it without a doubt. With the thud of feet upon wood, he landed on their balcony and pushed open the door. "Amelia!" Her name sputtered on his lips. The rooms were dark and cold despite it being near evening. "Em?" he called again, more tentatively. He moved through the small house, swinging open doors and calling her name. Everything was still and empty. He moved to the hearth and put his hands over the ash. Not a hint of warmth remained. He stilled his frenzied search. "Where is she?" In a flash, he realized the likely answer. He left the house without bothering to close the doors behind him and ran down the narrow path toward her family's home. Gord's machining shop was a large, low-strutted building. Across the open yard sat the family home, an impressive, stilted, multi-level structure tied into the nearby oaks. As he neared, the reassuring sound of clanging metal filtered through the air. He glanced toward the house, but moved to the opened doors of the shop and stood for a moment, watching Gord shaping a large sheet of metal with practiced movements. Gord glanced up. "How can I—" He did a double take, and his frown dissolved into a look of awe. "Holy sticks and stones, Knox!" His hammer dropped, and the sharp sound punctuated his look of amazement. Without another word, he moved around the table to Knox and pulled him into a rough hug. The acrid smell of welding torches and oil spoke more of home to him than Knox imagined possible, and he let out a relieved laugh. Gord pushed him out to arm's length. "We thought you dead, son. Thank the sky for bringing you back to us." The burly man before him, with thick arms and barreled chest, wiped tears from his cheeks. Worry lines creased his face. In his eyes, Knox could see the marks of fatigue, and his chest pinched. "Is Amelia inside?" Gord's mouth pressed tight. "Let's go in before we get to talking." A guiding hand landed on Knox's shoulder. "What is it?" A sudden weight rooted him to the floor. "Please tell me she's alive." Gord huffed a half-hearted laugh. "Oh, skies, yes. She's alive." Air flooded into Knox's lungs with a relieved whoosh before immediately locking up once again. "But—" "It's just—" Gord looked around the empty shop for help that wasn't there. "Something's wrong." "Gord?" a voice called from in the yard. Gord's face slacked in visible relief as they turned to see Maven walking toward the workshop. She caught sight of Knox and stopped, stunned. Her hands flew to her mouth, and she broke into a run. "You're alive!" She wrapped him in a hug as cold uncertainty wavered in his chest. Maven and Amelia may not have looked much like each other, but they shared the same spirit. Indomitable, beyond capable, and full of warmth and love for those they held close. If she was here, smiling, Amelia must be okay. Yet Maven avoided his eyes. "Why don't we go inside? I have some soup on." Knox didn't move. "Where's Amelia?" Maven paused, skipping the question much as Gord had. "You're not hungry?" His voice dropped as he forced the words out. "I don't need to eat." Maven's eyes flashed wide in surprise, and her dark eyes held his gaze for an extended moment. "Your strength has returned." It was a statement. "Your child—" "I know." He swallowed past the thick lump in his throat. "Where is Amelia?" Maven released his arms and stepped back as a wave of grief flashed across her features. "She left." "Left? Where?" Maven glanced toward Gord and waved him off as she led Knox to the bench in front of the shop. They sat. "She and Taryn left for the capital over a week ago now." He frowned. "Why would Taryn leave? The cluster needs his protection." "Word came from Aris. The Earthbound are all through the region. He went to the Order." "A messenger could do the job just as well." Maven cut him off with a raised hand. "He did as he felt he needed to do. Amelia as well." His mind raced along fragmented thoughts, darting back and forth, searching for the pieces that would make this all make sense. "Amelia is going to the Order?" Maven reached into the folds of fabric tied around her waist and pulled free a worn paper and held it out to him. Her eyes moved from the proffered note to him. "Read it." Knox's hands shook as he unfolded the sheet, and Amelia's familiar script met him. He sucked in a sharp breath, overwhelmed by the longing the script awoke in him. It was a tangible connection to her. Every moment since the day the beast had taken him, he'd been anticipating his return, Now he held her words in his hands and trembled at the ache they spawned in his chest. "Mother, I am so sorry to leave like this, but understand I must. Someone needs to hold the Order to account for what they've done to Nox. To you. I cannot stay. His absence tears at me. Maybe, if I find peace for his soul, I can find a little for myself. Emilia." "Hold the Order to account?" he said sharply. The look on Maven's face echoed his own terror. "She believes your death was the Order's fault, because they took your strength." He sucked in a long, slow breath, shaking his head. "I laid it down." Maven lifted a brow, questioning. Heat rushed to his face. "I did, Maven. They scarred me to prove it." He lifted his hand where the scar had marked. Nothing but unblemished skin remained. It was there. He stumbled over the words. "My power returned, and I started to heal again." Maven took his outstretched hand in both of hers. "I believe you." His heart rate slowed, and dread crept forward. She can't change the Order. If she questions them, she'll be in danger. "I agree." At a thought, he stood, pulling from the older woman, agitation and fire flooding his veins. "If they think I am dead, she's no longer bound or protected by our vows. She's going to get herself killed." He spun on Maven, who still sat. "I need to go. Have you heard from her since she left?" "Jai returned yesterday. He confirmed she's with Terran." A small thread of tension eased at the thought. "She's not alone." Almost as quickly, larger bands constricted around his chest. "If she's set on doing this, Terran won't be able to stop her." His voice sounded small in his own ears. How could he have made it all this way back again, only to still be helpless to keep her safe? "I think he found a way," Maven said, her voice low as her eyes met his. "Jai reported they were bonded." The words hit him as oddly meaningless and hollow. Bonded? They couldn't be. It didn't make any sense. She was his wife. How could she be bonded to anyone else? He stared at Maven, trying to comprehend what she could mean by such a bizarre statement. She stood slowly, her dark eyes filling with empathy. The long drapes of pleated fabric that made up her simple dress swept the ground as she stepped toward him. "She loves you, Nox. She's lost right now." He looked up slowly, taking in the familiar bearing of the woman before him. Strong, lean limbs, a graceful neck, and the same tilt of her chin as Emilia used when making her case. Terran must have recognized the danger she would be in without vows to protect her. His legs felt oddly unstable. "He exchanged vows with my wife?" Maven reached an arm out to him for support. Flashes of memory battered him with images of he and Emilia in this very space over the years. Laughter around the table during family dinners. Goodnight kisses stolen in the shadows. In this yard they had shared their own vows. The last time he'd been here, they walked hand in hand talking of simple plans. A pervasive numbness slowed his thinking, and he was dimly aware of Maven leading him toward the big house. But beneath it all, he could sense the building heat of a deep rage.